and welcome to another YouTuber twin test. Today I'm pitting my Evora 400 against this Jaguar F-Type. Now I've never ever driven an F-Type before. In fact, I've never even been in one before. And they're a car that I've been wanting to try for absolutely ages, but I never knew anyone with one. Jaguar said I wasn't popular enough to have one from them, so it's been one of those cars that, although I get asked about it a lot, I just never tried until now. Now the YouTube family is sometimes quite incestuous, so when I saw that Tom from Petrolheads London and Steph from Steph ABTV did a video comparing Steph's little Abarth with Tom's F-Type, I saw an opportunity. And as it turned out, Tom has never ever driven a Lotus of any description. So for those of you that have seen these videos before, the format's fairly familiar. I'm going to drive this car right now here on my channel, then on Tom's channel he's going to be driving my Evora and delivering you his thoughts on that. So it's going to be a two-part test across two channels with two YouTubers. I hope you enjoy. Now before I hop in this car, there are a couple of prejudices that I have against the F-Type that I really feel like I should confess to. Now to the casual observer, you might think that these two cars are very similar. They are both British designed and built cars, and this is a convertible, but it's available as a coupe with roughly 400-ish horsepower and performance figures that aren't worlds apart from each other. However, if you delve into the numbers a little more deeply, nothing could be further from the truth. Now, this car has a 3-litre supercharged V6 versus the Evora's 3.5-litre Toyota-derived supercharged V6. Now, this engine is one of the things about the car that I don't like. It sounds great, but from an engineering perspective, well, it's just lazy. Now, 380 horsepower from a 3-litre V6 is fine. It's not the power output that I have a problem with. And in terms of torque, it beats the larger V6 in the Evora. It's got about 340 pound-foot versus my 300. Now the way that Jaguar have created this engine is basically by taking their AJ133 5-litre V8 and cutting 2 cylinders off. Now this is nothing new. Other manufacturers have done that, notably Alfa Romeo have done it with the Giulia's engine, which everyone knows is a Ferrari V8 with a couple of cylinders cut off. BMW did it years ago when they made the E92's V8 from the E60's V10 just by cutting 2 cylinders off. Now that does a couple of things for this car. First off, it means that your V angle is 90 degrees versus the 60 degrees for the Toyota V6 in the Evora, which is a more traditional angle. Now that refers to how the cylinders are spaced in the V. 90 degrees is the perfect spacing for a V8, not a V6. But because Jaguar have just cut those cylinders off the end, that's what you wind up with. That's why it sounds different to the Evora, and of course the exhaust is a different design too. Unfortunately, Jaguar haven't really developed it fully, in my mind. I'm not an engineer, the guys that built this are, but from a layperson's perspective, it looks like a bit of a hatchet job. What you've got in here is a 6-cylinder V6 head sat on a V8 block. Essentially, if you take this engine apart, you'll find it's the same size as the V8. And the crankshaft is then the same length. So this car is carrying an awful lot of unnecessary weight right where you don't want it, up the front. And that means that one of the reasons a lot of people would have for buying the V6, i.e. it being lighter and better handling, doesn't really apply. Now that second prejudice I mentioned is related to weight. Now my Evora in the real world weighs around 1,440 kilos and it attracts children like flies. Now, the last car I reviewed last weekend was the BMW Z4 S-Drive 35 IS. If you haven't seen that video or don't know the car, it's a 3-litre, 6-cylinder convertible. Sound familiar? 2 seats only, but it's got a hard folding top. Now, because of that and the way the car is designed and built, it's about 150 kilos heavier than my Evora. Now this car, having a lot of aluminium in its construction and a soft top roof, you would imagine would be around that weight, if not a bit lighter. No, this car is another 150 kilos on top, meaning this is 300 kilos heavier than that. Now, I feel like these things are very, very important to mention because I generally have a fairly strict policy of trying not to read too much about a car or its possible fault before I review it, because I don't want my own review to be coloured by the opinions of others. As it happens though with the F-Type, because it's a car that was of interest to people in my family years ago before I did YouTube, and when the car came out, I read about all these things and so I know them, so I think it's only fair that I share that information with you. And now it's time to take it out and just see if that really makes a difference or not. So this is my first ever time sitting in a Jaguar F-Type. Yeah, I've never even been in one. So I want to start off by saying a big thanks to Tom for bringing his car up. It's been a bit of a trip for him, and I really don't know what to expect. Now, we've just been out, we've done the Evora portion of the video first, so we've just been out in that. Now, getting in this car, first impressions. The way the dash and everything is laid out, the way you sit in the car, it's very reminiscent of the Aston Martins that I've driven, certainly the new generation Astons. You've got this big sweeping console here. Now, the quality of the buttons and things is certainly not up to Aston Martin's standard, that's for sure. The car has the 8-speed ZF gearbox that appears in just about everything now. They do also offer a manual, which came reasonably late. I mean, they took a couple of years before they offered a manual. How many people have actually optioned them? I really don't know, but I suspect the reality is that most people buying these cars probably wanted the auto. It works okay. Hopefully I'll get it on some roads where I can drive it in a more spirited fashion. It's not quite as slick as a dual clutch box, but I'll let it warm a bit more and see how it behaves. Compared to my car, it's certainly, I would say, at least as stiff. We're going to get it on some probably slightly more challenging roads, but even this road, which is an A road, so it should be half decent, but it's not. This is England, yeah, it's British. The car rides okay. Obviously got a nice amount of noise coming from the back. Now, this is very different to my car, of course, because, you know, someone's left the engine at the front rather than tucking it neatly behind you, and that really does change the character of the car. Now, Jaguar say that this car offers precise handling, so we'll see about that. Something at the minute that really is putting me off a little bit is this massive steering wheel. I'm told it's looted from the genuine Jaguar parts bin, so it's essentially the same item that you'll find in things like the Evoque. Now, in cars like that, it sort of is fairly at home because anyone that buys an Evoque probably doesn't care about driving anyway. But in an F-Type, I want something a little bit sporty. It's thin-rimmed, but the whole thing just feels very, very chunky. Also, despite the fact that this exterior looks lovely, and I'll admit, I actually am one of the very few people that probably prefers the looks of the XK over the F-Type. In particular, the XK RS in Riviera Blue was sensational. But when I do see these, they're not especially common cars. They are growing on me in the flesh, and this is a very nice colour that Tom's picked here. I quite like the one I believe they call Fire Sand, which is sort of like a sunburst, burnt orange looking colour. That's very striking. And there's some very nice shades available for the SVR as well. They do a really nice blue too. Despite the fact that it looks nice and sharp and angled from the outside, unfortunately, although this is a very high-spec car, on the inside, the dominant theme is black. It's car noir in here, which is a shame because I think it detracts from the overall design of the interior, which is not at all bad. There seems to be a bit of a fight going on here between previous generation and current generation Jaguar stuff as well. So like these dials and things here, they're lovely, they're nice. The gear lever's okay. Some of the buttons here, they're fine. They're what I'd expect, certainly for an entry level F-Type, your sort of 50 to 60,000 pound car, they're acceptable. Nav screen, not so great. It's definitely feeling its age, even though it shouldn't be. Pretty much the same unit used in, well, loads of other JLR products, and it's not brilliant. put it that way. See, I mean, you guys can't see it on camera. I'll do a little shot. The air bit pops out of the dash here. I mean, this is how you wind up with a car that weighs 300 kilos more than mine. There's no need for that to be motorized.
It looks beautiful.
It looks sexy, and I've no doubt a lot of people get in it and go, woo, you know, lovely. But
until it breaks.
yeah, it's just, it doesn't need to be like that at all. That's just unnecessary. Now, we're on an aero. I've got a little bit of distance between the car in front of me. Let's try and get a bit of feel for the performance. So I've dropped into third, 3,500 RPM, doing 40 mile an hour. It picks up fairly well. Our throttle response is very good, which is a characteristic of supercharged engines. It does sound quite nice. It doesn't have the top end rush that my car does. The Evora, once you get to about 5,000 RPM, it really starts to pick up and it runs towards that red line, which is basically shared between these two cars. It's about 7,000 RPM, but the Evora's certainly got more character at that top end. Now, in terms of road noise, for a convertible, this is okay. It's neither bad nor brilliant. It's kind of in the middle, which is fine. Now, I spoke about the size of this wheel. I want to talk about the size of the other wheels. Now, the tyres on this car are huge. Considering this is basically, let's say, the mid of the range. So you've got the V6, which is 340 horsepower. This, the V6S, which is 380. They did a F-Type 400, which I think was a special edition. I don't know whether they still make it or not. But that was a 400 horsepower, obviously. And then they do the V8. Now, originally they did a V8 and a V8R, but I think they've dropped the regular V8. They just do the R. And they also used to do a two-wheel drive version of the V8. So you can have these cars in two or all-wheel drive. The V8 now is available exclusively in all-wheel drive. I think because they realized that the V8 was basically just turning tyres into dust, and as a consequence, its performance numbers were never that great, and this is the reason why the F-Type SVR and so on are all-wheel drive, because they found that the car had just got so much grunt, it just needed that all-wheel drive. That's all right.
I'm so sorry.
He's dying. He's a dying man. That's all right. Let it out, man. Let it out.
Good.
So the tyres on this car are pretty chunky. I was very surprised. So the Evora wears 235s at the front, which is reasonably average, and 285s at the rear, which is a decent size. This has 255s at the front and 295s at the rear. I was really surprised to see that. I did not expect them to be that big at all. Now, the steering weight is actually quite light, even though I'm in dynamic mode. The last thing I drove was the Evora, because I brought it up here, and I thought it would feel a bit heavier. Now, I'm going to wait till we get on some more challenging roads to see how much feedback it gives me. It's fairly responsive from the dead ahead, but it is quite light. You can definitely feel that it's, you know, been engineered to be more on the GT side of sporting. Okay, national speed limit. Let's have fun. It pulls along nicely enough. For a lot of people, this would certainly be considered an adequate amount of performance. It just feels quite linear in its delivery to me. So the engine gets an okay from me. It's when you consider the amount of weight that it's having to pull along, you know, heavy car, two fully grown blokes in it, you know, that's not too bad. I think the engine's doing okay. I would rather it was a proper V6 and didn't have that extra lump of metal attached to it, but, you know, such is life. And because of those very wide tyres and that wide stance, it wants to try and follow the camber of the road, which is a little bit extreme on this road in particular. It is quite firmly sprung. You can feel that as you pile on the speed. Now the Evora pulls a magic trick. As you go faster, the car actually seems to get softer and gets more pliant, more responsive. It becomes very, very fun to pedal along at pace. This seems to be doing the opposite, whereas as I'm piling on the speed, it actually seems to be stiffening up somewhat and responding to the fact that it's a big heavy car at the end of the day. It's not Nissan GT-R stiff, but it's not the smooth cosseting ride one might expect of a Jaguar. If you're an Aston person, this rides closer to the V8 Vantage S than the regular car. We spent a lot of the morning trying to find a half-decent road for the Lotus, and I feel really bad because we took Tom down some tiny, horrible little roads. And yeah, they're little villages and things, and now I've suddenly found this nice, long, flowing road which actually really suits something like the Lotus. And it's nice because you've got these long stretches here where you can overtake safely, which is great, especially when you're driving a car that you don't know. It does sound pleasant enough, and because it has 8 gears, when you're doing a reasonable speed, it revs very low, so even with the exhaust in noisy mode, it's nice enough. You do have plenty of creature comforts in here. Tom, would you mind talking me through some of the options that this car has?
Well, we were talking earlier as well. One of the problems with this is actually Jags are very option heavy. So dual climate control, which this one doesn't have, which I know is only between here and here. So you still have the 2 buttons. So to me, that's a bit of a niggle as well.
It doesn't have dual climate,
but it has both the buttons. Yes. So
okay,
they basically disable it.
That's rubbish.
Cheapskates.
That's really really stingy of them.
It is quite stingy, yes.
Because you'd look at that and I'd be like, oh, if I was selling this car to someone, I'd be like, oh, dual zone climate control, like. But
when I was looking for this car, because I bought it used, I really wanted this colour with these wheels, and because the wheels are also, you choose from a whole gamut of different wheels, trying to find the right version when you're not speccing it yourself from new is quite difficult. So this doesn't have power folding mirrors, and it also doesn't have auto dip reversing mirror, which to me is, well, it's already cost me a rear wheel in terms of scuffing it, which is my own fault. But things like that I think should be standard. Has heated seats, again, is an option, and that's pretty much it in terms of kind of some of the standard stuff. It has, as you pointed out, half electric seats. Again, this bit's an option. You can get full electric seats with memory. Again, it's another option.
So let's do a bit of a comparison here. So, because these are both cars, I would nearly put them in the bracket of your 911 alternative. Someone wants a sporty car that they can still daily. You know, it's got enough room in it, you know, but let's call it a 2-seater or 2 and a bit in my case.
Yeah.
It's got enough room for a few little bits. Boot space in this is compromised. Let's just say that. I think that there's more storage in the Evora. There is. If you count the back seats. If you count the back seats, which I do.
I'll give you that. Yeah.
So let's.
And that's why I love the 911 when I had one of those, because those back seats were bugger all good.
And the Cayman is very practical because the Cayman's got 2 boots.
Yeah.
So, but we're not here to sell Porsches. So let's keep the British end up as best we can. So let's compare some like trivial but important things.
Sure.
So on your journey up here, what kind of MPG were you getting? Just motorway kind of stuff?
Oh God, probably mid-20s. I think it's supposed to hit about 31, and I think I've done that once. I mean, if you want to enjoy it, you're never going to get that.
Really? Okay, so I get, on the motorway, I can actually get about 34 out of mine.
Yeah, no chance.
Oh, what a Brera. No, a Spider even, 939 Spider. So, wow, look at this road. So, I get low 30s on mine on the motorway. Again, both these cars, when you're pressing on, aren't going to do so great, but I'd say the Lotus is going to be probably a bit better on fuel. This is available with the better auto box, whereas the Lotus has a fantastic manual, so if that's a consideration, I'd say.
And they're both great, but in their own way. So having driven James's car, which I loved, it's just so different, but even though they're kind of pegged similarly, and that manual just is beautiful.
Service interval?
Is annual. In fact, it's due in about a month and a half's time.
Annual or what mileage?
I think it's 12,000.
Okay, mine's annual or 9,000, so it's a little bit shorter. Rough costs for a service?
The last one was quite high actually. So I think they tend to vary between sort of 600 and 900 pounds, depending on whether it's big or small.
Oh, ouch.
But that's using a Jaguar service centre.
So the Lotus, yes, slightly shorter intervals, so 9K or annual. Most people are probably just doing it on the annual basis with the Evora. £300 to £500 for most. So that's from a Lotus centre, which obviously there aren't as many of, which can be a consideration for some people. They want a nearer place, and there are a lot more Jag dealerships than there are Lotus ones. And
but we were discussing this earlier, and the problem I think with a lot of the big dealerships is they don't tend to do engineering anymore. So in the old days, they would fix something, whereas most big manufacturers these days replace parts. So if there's something wrong, they're just like, well, a whole new part. And actually,
not necessary.
You could fix it.
So and let's discuss something as well, because I know it's pretty much impossible to do anything online with a Lotus without someone going, oh, lots of trouble, usually serious. But I would say that actually JLR have got a damn good case for being just as bad, not necessarily on the build quality. Now, you were talking about what I think of the build quality of this car. I mean, it feels okay. I mean, it feels fine, but I read constantly horror stories of people, and the problem is that the issues that they have with JLR products, so that could be this, that could be a Disco, that could be a full-size Range Rover, an Evoque, anything. It's not so much the problems are very big. Like, one of the most common problems I read is with the door cards rattling, especially if you've got like the premium sound system. The door cards love to rattle.
I've had stuff done to these door cards actually because the speakers used to rattle in them.
Yeah, and it's
so
a
that
common
was
problem.
Just the linings were wrong, and again, through talking to people on forums, which I do a lot, I kind of find out what the problem was. And to be fair, Jaguar fixed it, but like, these are just things day one that they should
have sorted
be
it.
Right,
but also, it's something like your speakers rattle. That's not really a life-ending problem at all.
Yeah.
But I've seen so many people that have had so much trouble getting Jaguar to acknowledge that there's an issue and fixing it, and that's where the problem is. You expect Jaguar to be a premium brand. I know certainly in the UK, Jaguar is seen as a premium brand. I'd say it's seen as at least equivalent with BMW and Mercedes. I think some people hold it in higher regard. I know somewhere like the USA, I would think Jaguar is probably definitely seen as a premium alternative, because I know the cars are really expensive over there compared to what you can get, on the domestic market. And so, JLR's customer service does worry me, because they seem to be very kind of blasé about any sort of problems that they might have. I mean, so overall, really, driving this car, actually, I mean, I thought I really, really wasn't going to like it, but actually it's perfectly pleasant enough. I don't think I'd ever have one, because it's a very, very different car to the Lotus, really. I'd love to have another crack at this on slightly more familiar and actually tighter and twistier roads to see really how well it can do the sports car thing. I don't think it's ever going to be what the Lotus is, and that's fine, because I think Jaguar probably have an issue. Well, they've got several, I'm sure, but like many companies, the people that do the marketing and the people that build their car seem to have very, very different aims. Whereas I think Jaguar's marketing would try and have you believe this is some kind of super sporty car, and I'm sure like the V8 version in particular, and that's, if I was going to have one, I probably would have the V8, because the weight difference is only minimal. It's like a 40 kilo weight difference between the two because of the way they developed that engine. So that would be more fun. That does silly things as well. Like, I followed one, and the amount of pops and crackles you get from the exhaust are just stupid. I haven't actually heard it in this too much.
It does do it as you back off the accelerator. You can
I heard it a little
yeah.
earlier, but it wasn't silly. I mean, yeah, it's not crazy, but I followed a V8 F-Type once, and it was just like someone throwing fireworks out the window.
They are, yeah, far noisier on the exhaust, I must admit. Less fuel efficient, though.
Yeah. I'd like the interior to be a little bit brighter. I think it would benefit from, you know, a touch of just like even something simple like red stitching.
See, it's an option.
Yeah, it's an option. Of course it's an option. Of course it's an option. But overall, and the one thing I should really say about these cars is that they've been out for a few years now, and there are some real bargains out there, particularly with the V8. So when the car came out, a lot of people bought V8 convertibles in particular. And after a couple of years, they were kind of done with them, or they moved to the coupe because they released the convertible first very unusual for a manufacturer, and then they went to the coupe, and so you can find like V8 convertibles out there for like 50 grand or less, and that's a lot of car for the money.
Yeah, the V8s took a massive bath on value, and actually, interestingly, this, the 3 litre V6S, has actually kind of stabilised value-wise.
Yeah.
So it's, I don't know whether it's a good investment, and we were talking earlier, I'm not sure cars are an investment like this, but it feels the more stable model. And
It's a safer place to have your money.
Yeah, and the V8s, I mean, were renowned for just absolutely shedding value, and they are a great car. I mean, I've driven and reviewed a V8 all-wheel drive VR, and yeah, it's amazing, and the sound it gives is that higher level. And I do kind of, maybe prefer that slightly, but this is very usable on a day-to-day basis. And
I think if you want a sports car, definitely go for the Lotus, but it's better at the GT thing than I think most people realise.
Yeah.
If you wanted to split the difference, actually you'd probably be looking at a V8 Vantage. In terms of the Vantage is not as sporty as the Lotus. The odd thing, actually, the Vantage, an early 4.3 V8 Vantage is more comfortable than this.
Do you think so?
Yeah.
And I've done a head-to-head with one of those before as well. And
I think it's actually better suspension on it.
But then you put it in normal mode, it's a lot softer.
Not night and day. It's a bit better. But yeah, so there we go. The Jaguar F-Type. I don't hate it, which actually I was really... And I got a fair play to Tom. I know I get stuff, people mention stuff in the comments about what I say about cars when, the owner's in the car and that. And actually Tom earlier, he explicitly told me, he said, if you think it's a heap, just say. Just don't hold back. Just go for it. Just both barrels.
You might be wrong.
And actually, I mean, like, but actually, no, I haven't felt that. I think it's a better car than I expected. I think I'd set myself up to really hate it, and I have to be honest. That's what I promise you guys will always be. I'll be honest, and I don't hate it at all. It's actually perfectly pleasant. So thanks for bringing it up, Tom.
No worries.
Appreciate it. And go and check out Tom's channel for his review on the Evora. Spoiler, he likes it. And also more information about one of these. So if you want to know even more about what this is like to live with on a daily basis, because this is not a garage queen, this is not he's not some YouTuber that just has something for about 30 days and then flips it 50 miles later,
wraps it,
exhaust. Yeah, we're terrible YouTubers. We're awful. So he's owned this car for 2 years and how many miles?
Not a massive. We were talking about this. I was saying I use it all the time. So I've done about 11,000 miles.
But it's in London though, so that's it's a different environment. So, and obviously that's another reason you'd have an automatic if you do live in the city. So go and see his channel for more information on that. Thank you guys for watching. Please hit like if you haven't already. Subscribe if you can. Comment below what you think, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.